Hello everyone and welcome back to another industry report. Today we absolutely need to talk about CEO pay. There are two reasons. Number one, much of the reporting in both the game's press and the punditry scene has been wildly inaccurate, being either overt lies or those of omission, with groups choosing to enrage audiences rather than to inform them, which is downright irresponsible, and more importantly, it is damaging to the goal of holding truth to power. Our coverage should be talking about things like Dodd-Frank. It should be talking about fiscal policy, the actual things that are important to solving the problem of income inequality with S&P 500 CEOs. That's increasingly something that people on both sides of the political fence see as a problem. I want to go as hard on these types and these problems as I can. I want to follow the money. I want to call out bad practices and the damage that it has on both the industry and the ruinous effect that it can have on the core design of many modern games. However, in order to mount an effective resistance to these things, we must understand the things that we are resisting. We need to make our cases based on truth, and that is the goal today. Not to grandstand here, but man, some really sloppy work has been done by major sites. While pay and compensation might seem like very similar words, they're actually wildly different, especially in terms of their impact on a company's cash flow, which is actually the thing that impacts things such as employees and profitability. So what happened here? Well, Bobby Kotick and Andrew Wilson were listed on a report of being some of the most overpaid CEOs in America. Of course, they're of Activision Blizzard and Electronic Arts. Now, this was originally covered by GameIndustry.biz, who unfortunately did quite a poor job of summarizing the initial report. And then, of course, most sites just sourced the original GameIndustry.biz article, therefore, a game of telephone began. Now, the original report is from As You Sow. They're a non-profit who advocate for corporate responsibility, partially through their yearly CEO overpayment report. And a large part of their goal with this report is to look at shareholder opposition to CEO pay packages and to provide a bit of a ranking of the most responsible shareholders. For an example, in 2015, Allianz opposed 11.1% of the most overpaid CEO pay packages, but in 2018 they opposed 76.6% of them, which is a good thing. The opposition is mounting there. The core takeaway is that CEO pay is actually increasing, but the resistance from larger shareholders is slowly beginning to increase, as is evidenced by this graph. I mean, it really is not all sunshine and roses. The report does end by talking about how more resistance is needed from shareholders and how shareholders need to be responsible about things like this and actually provide resistance, but that the initial trends are good. We just need to see them go further. Ultimately, the report takes a pragmatic, systems-first approach to the problem. Now, as an example, the Dodd-Frank package of legislation passed in 2010, and it's a decent example of this because one part of it finally reached implementation, which is the requirement for companies to disclose the ratio between the total pay package of their CEO and the median pay package of their employees. And when you look at this data, if you look at everything with that data in hand, you actually see that that's when shareholders began to vote more against the CEO pay packages. Of course, not enough to have it overall decrease, but it's moving in the right direction. So how do video games come into this? Well, they provided a list of the most overpaid CEOs based on those Dodd-Frank ratios. It shows their pay package with the excess pay basically computed by their methodology that compares it with total shareholder return, and then the ratio. So Activision Blizzard's Bobby Kotick came in at rank 45 with a total pay package of $28.6 million, in excess of $12.8 million, 92% shareholder approval for the pay package, and a 306-1 against his median employee. EA's Andrew Wilson came in at 98 with a higher pay package of $35.7 million, excess of $19.6 million, shareholder approval of 97, and a ratio of 371-1. Man, that really is a hell of a difference. And while the approval rating was high for these companies, the approval ratings were low for companies like FleetCor and Oracle. Now, that's not across the board, and a lot of this report is saying that, look, we're getting more opposition, that's good, but it ain't enough. So, Andrew and Bobby are wealthy guys. We very much worked that out. That's for sure. But notice that I said pay package. I did not say salary. That's because there's a massive difference. You see, you can be paid with cash, and you can also be paid with assets. Assets that will have market value, such as shares. However, often these shares have stipulations due to the SEC. They're heavily regulated. As an example, if Bobby knows he's going to have a bad quarter and then he mysteriously dumps a lot of his shares just before the earnings call, he's going to be in serious trouble for insider trading. That might, well, if he did that, he might disappear for a while. But here's what's very important about this. $1 million in cash. Well, that, to put it very simply, comes from the company's current account. $1 million in shares does not. It just doesn't. It's equity in the company. So let's do some fantasy maths. A publicly traded company is worth 1 million. If somebody gets 1% in shares, that's an asset. Those 1% of shares is an asset that's worth 10 grand. And it does not have any impact over the cash flow of the company, i.e. the cash that actually pays employees. If those shares are then sold in the market, then yeah, like they'll get money, but that money will not come from the company. So with that in mind, let's head over to salary.com and take a look at what these guys actually got paid. So for Andrew, he got a base pay of 1.141 million with a cash bonus of 2.5. Past that, he got 32 million in a stock value award and 61 grand in other expenses for a total compensation of 35.7 million. That is so much value, but it's important to take into account that that's compensation, and of that compensation, 3.6 million was in cash. Here's the thing with stocks, right? Those stocks have value and they're sold in the market based on the value of the company. Other than a loss in equity, the company loses nothing by giving him those. And okay, sure, having an officer sell a massive amount of their stock is typically seen as a fairly bad thing if it's outside of their planned stock sell-off. Now, when we move over to Bobby Kotick, we see the same thing. His base salary was higher than Wilson's at 1.75 million with a cash bonus of 2.8, giving him a total cash compensation of 4.5 million, and then 24 million in equity on top of that. Now, many people have said that Bobby Kotick's 28 million could have paid for a bunch of the staff that were let off. Here's the thing, of the 28 million, only 4.5 of that comes from the business's cash. So if that 28 million in value went entirely to the employees, then you'd have a lot of employees being paid in equity, and at the end of the day, you can't pay for rent or a sandwich directly with equity. Bobby Kotick drained 4.5 million from the company's coffers through his compensation package. That is a lot of money, but it's not enough to largely impact the job losses that we just saw. Now, look, I get it. This is a really boring video, right? If this was written in a website, it would be a boring as hell article. And it took half a day of research and writing, unlike the 20 minutes that it takes to rewrite somebody else's rewrite of the conclusion of a subsection of a report. Personally, I absolutely dislike how these things are going. Massively. I think it's a really big problem, the CEO pay situation, and I think that it has a big impact on company profitability and actually shareholder returns as well. I think it is in the interests of shareholders to rectify this problem, and as the report that sparked off this whole thing suggests, that seems to be the pragmatic approach. Looking at Bobby's 28 million, well, you know what? You could probably have some of, you could probably have that be smaller, first of all. I'm big for staff having equity, a little bit of skin in the game. Having their stock options, accrue and unlock after an initial employment period seems to be a good thing. That way, if the company does fantastically, yeah, the CEO gets a nice little bonus, but also maybe the employees will get a 15 grand bonus that year instead of 8. Or something like that. Maybe for a lower level employee, it wouldn't be as much, but it would still be enough to matter, and at least they would feel like, hey, the company's doing well. I just got a larger bonus at the end of the year because the company's done well. What's important is that, that's motivating for people. It gives people a reason to care, a bit of skin in the game. They'll be more motivated to work. They'll probably perform better. You'll likely increase productivity, which, guess what, will be pretty good for your share price. Now, for me, that's kind of an ideal solution. Basically, instead of all of the equity going, but basically just having more equity for employees, I think that's overall a good thing. And then combined with shareholders putting up more resistance to things like this. And we see that going in the right direction, but really not far enough. And all of this shows the importance of having information. Now, I do not want to take a political stance on Dodd-Frank. I don't know it fully. However, the pay ratio data is interesting. More data for the market to work with. And we have seen shareholders increasingly vote against the increased pay packages since getting that data. And I think this shows that an understanding of the mechanics of how this whole thing works is actually important. I really don't think that putting on a large performance that's based on willfully misinterpreting data is healthy when writing articles and doing coverage of things like this. Understanding is what's really important. I don't mean understanding these people. I mean actually understanding how these things work. In many ways, economics is a bit of a study of incentives, and that means some of our game design tendencies can be mapped on. That's indeed why you see companies like Valve and CCP have actual economists be a part of their design process, because it's about working out the incentive structures and the behavior created by them. So look, what I hope this has been is a coherent summary of the facts. and also pointing out how sadly the facts and what's actually happening wildly differs from much of the industry press and the punditry that has covered this. And I think that's a big problem. I think it creates a less informed, it doesn't help to inform people. And ultimately, the point of journalism should be to work this stuff out and actually give people information so that they know what the hell's actually going on. And as for punditry, well, that's not really the role of punditry, but I think there's like responsibility. Like, it's irresponsible to say report 28 million in compensation in the way that many people have, because it's not what actually happened. And if you're going to, like, ultimately, if we want to have less job losses, we need to be realistic about, like, the finances that are involved. If we're just saying a bunch of loud, angry things because it makes us feel good and it riles people up and gets more clicks and stuff like that, that's actually not going to help people stay in jobs. That's just going to be wildly unproductive. So really, yeah, this has been a bit of a different video. It's likely one's going to be downvoted to hell because, I mean, it's not even that this is a counter-narrative video. Personally, I'm still saying, like just about everybody else involved, I'm saying I dislike this, CEO pay situation. What I'm trying to do is actually bring a bit of reality into the discussion, because at the end of the day, we need to be operating within the realms of reality. So there you go. There's plenty of other content on this channel. You can check out the Red Dead stuff. You can check out the Nintendo and Microsoft Alliance, which is super interesting. That stuff's all on the channel, so you can check that out if you need something to watch after this. But other than that, thank you very much for watching this video. Let me know what you think down below, and I'll see you next time.